Hello and welcome to another episode of PPC Town Hall. My name is Fred Valles. I'm your host today. I'm also the co-founder and CEO at Optmyzr. So we're going to continue the conversation we've been having, which is about automation and how it's changing PPC. And today we have two amazing experts to help us figure out how they're making the transition, how they're transitioning people in their agencies when there's more automation, how they're transitioning processes to deal with all this automation. And we're also going to learn which automations they like and which ones they don't. So I'm sure somebody at some point is going to talk about PMax and hopefully spill the beans and tell us how they're making the most of that. I know that's a hot topic these days. But our guests today are going to be Kasim, Aslam, and Patrick Gilbert. We'll have them introduce themselves in just a minute, but this is going to be an amazing episode. So thanks for joining us. Let's get rolling with PPC Town Hall. All right, and here are my guests for today. We got Patrick and we got Kasim. So Kasim, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm the founder and CEO of Solutions 8. I like to be a little petulant and say we're the #1 ranked Google Ads agency on the planet, but we actually lost our ranking when Google made their recent core update. So I think we're like #7 now. And we're Google specific. And we've got a fun little YouTube channel where we'll run around and teach everybody all the things that we're learning and mostly the mistakes that we're making, which are significant. And I think this is maybe the most exciting point in my career, period. With the changes that Google made, the last 2 years retroactively have been a nightmare because we couldn't see where Google was going. But now that they've sort of, lifted the curtain and gave us the aha moment and presentation, it's been pretty cool. It all feels like it's coming together. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Nice. I'm sorry to hear about losing the ranking, but you do amazing work, so I'm really happy to have you here. Watch those videos as well. Some of them are a bit more controversial, but it's good content, and Kasim is always sharing good advice. Patrick, you run an agency as well, right? So tell us about what you do in Adventure Media.
Awesome. So my official, unofficial title is Chief Operating Officer, but my background is in client services and strategy. So I spend a great deal of my time working directly with our clients and the rest of our team here to make sure that we're aligning on overall strategy, sharing the best ideas throughout our organization, and doing the best work possible for clients. I'm also the author of Join or Die, Digital Advertising Age of Automation. Got to plug the book. Check it out on Amazon or anywhere you get books, which is probably just Amazon. And yeah, just Adventure Media. So we've been around for 8 years. Started out as a traditional Google Ads agency, branched out into Facebook while ago, and have continued to grow our service offering. Today, I kind of describe us most as being somewhere between a traditional PPC agency and a consulting firm. At this point, I think we embraced the concept of automation, I think, earlier than most, and we've helped shepherd a lot of clients along in this journey, which led to a lot of the content that we've put out over the years, including the book. And excited to be a part of this conversation and see how we might be able to give some advice to some other fans of PPC Town Hall.
Yeah, thank you for coming on to the show today, Patrick. Definitely recommend the book, Join or Die, so check it out. We'll put the link here in the show notes and the chat as well. And then, Patrick, you also work with Isaac Rudensky, right? And he's probably like the #1 teacher of Google Ads on the Udemy. So if you haven't seen that course, definitely check it out.
He is, and I'm taking all of my self-control to not turn the camera over because I can see into his office where he's eating lunch right now. And
yeah, do it, turn it. Let's see, go full screen on that.
There's Isaac. We spend a lot of our time just kind of making weird faces at one another. So happy to get a very embarrassing shot of him eating what appears to be avocado toast.
All right. So there's like Nerf gun darts flying at your head later. We know where it's coming from.
Probably not great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. So, I mean, you both kind of alluded to it, right? But in this age of automation, you guys have been on the cutting edge, and happy you say that the veil has been lifted from Google's perspective. But that's really my first question. So this rise of automation, I think I talked to a lot of agencies and they're just worried. Like, are we going to be having anything to do? So mostly I hear it in the context of it's like a bad thing. It's threatening our livelihoods. But it sounds like you guys are a bit more upbeat. So good thing or bad thing, automation? Kasim, why don't we start with you?
It's a difficult question. I'm not trying to be a fence sitter. I know we have limited time, but it's like, was the automobile good or bad? And it's like, well, if you sold horse and buggies, it was a horrible thing, or it's bad for the environment. So I just think it's an absolute inevitability, and I think that the conversation needs to be fast forwarded from an industry perspective. I'm not saying our conversation here, because if agencies are fighting it, they're already antiquated. There's no question that this is the direction that we're going to head, because it's the direction of scale and where all the advertising networks are going to send us. That said, what I would tell agencies is you'll always have a place. And generally speaking, I actually think your place is going to become far more important. What we've noticed just in the last 18 to 24 months is the ability to interpret data and assist clients in identifying what's real from an attribution perspective and there's no way for me to put a multiplier on this, so I'll just be hyperbolic and say has doubled the value that we bring to the vast majority of our larger clients. Small clients we've lost, and I've lost when we, pre-PMax is, I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag here. Our minimum was $3,000 a month. We would take on a client who was spending $3,000 a month. Post PMax, November 2021, we lifted it from 3 to 10. And then since then, clients that are spending sub 10 for us are either on our incubator program or we just don't take them. And we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see a lot of, it's not that people spending less than $10,000 a month can't run ads. It's that they can't run ads and pay an agency. And the agency is, you're just sitting there and twiddling your thumbs because there's not enough data for you to really make actionable changes. The computer's doing the whole damn thing for you. So you'll probably have to level up a little bit. I think we're going to see a lot of burning off of dead wood. But for real agencies, for good agencies, that's a good thing. Because right now, if I throw a rock in any crowded room, I'm going to hit 4 people that run paid ads. And it's every idiot kid that's taken a weekend course. And they muddy the waters for us. They tell the inadequate stories and they don't manage expectations. And those will be the companies going away. People that can really do the job and do it well. You're going to be more thoroughly embedded than ever. That's my soft opinion.
I agree with that. I mean, so it's like, this is so many times you hear, hey, we talked to the neighbor kid, he's in high school or she's in high school. We asked them to help us with PPC because it's like computer stuff. And kids seem to know computer stuff, right? But clearly there's a lot of value that we can add. But it is curious because at one point when like smart shopping came out, I was of the opinion that was actually a boon for agencies, because now you could actually work with these smaller clients, but basically put them on the right form of autopilot, put some controls in place, and kind of help them with these onboarding stages. But definitely what you're saying makes a lot of sense too. If you're not spending a lot of money on PPC, then there's nothing in it for the agency. And also, I think the more data you have and the more that you can look across different companies and similar verticals, you can probably bring a lot of value to your clients. But Patrick, I'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I really appreciate you setting the stage in the way that you just did, because that is the reality of it. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I've been saying this for a while. Automation is an incredible thing. And I've really leaned into the concept that automation will change your job, but it won't replace you. And I think that what we've seen over the last 3 years now, maybe even a little bit more, is that the opportunity for us to provide value to our clients has been more than ever. It's just very different. And I think to your point, I think the history of digital advertising has really just been capitalizing on different versions of arbitrage. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a lot. He talks about the concept of attention arbitrage, which is the first thing of when the biggest brands in the world were all advertising on TV, but most attention has shifted to, let's say, online and then eventually to mobile. It was cost effective for anyone to go in, and it was cheaper than it should have been. And that's the concept of arbitrage. It's cheaper than it should be. And I think the early days of Google Ads was that, where you could sell a product very easily by capitalizing on Google search. You just find the right keywords. And then a lot of people came to Google. So the next version of arbitrage became finding the long tail keywords. And then that became kind of oversaturated. So it became the quality score question. So it was really just people finding that niche of hey, this costs less than it should, And the best agencies, the ones that were growing the most, or the ones that were doing the best work for their brands, were the ones that were just capitalizing on these arbitrage pieces. Facebook was a huge thing where all of a sudden any person that was smart enough to upload an audience list and make a lookalike audience in the Facebook would just being able to churn out money and grow brands' revenue at magnificent scale. That has all caught up to us now. We're now in a position where there was this great book that came out by someone I know called Unleveling the Playing Field. By the way, that's Fred's book. If you guys haven't read it yet, it's phenomenal. But that's the concept of like all these platforms keep coming out with the new version of leveling the playing field, and you have to figure out what that new arbitrage opportunity is. My point now, though, my thought on this is that all that's done. All the arbitrage is gone, and now we're back to the basics of doing real marketing and advertising. And I've never had more fun doing the work than I have over the last 2 to 3 years, because what this shift to automation has really done is beforehand there was a lot of mediocre advertisers, or so let's call them mediocre agencies, that got away with mediocre strategy that were effective at selling mediocre products. And today, if you do one of those 3 things and all those things aren't great, you're not going to succeed. So it is kind of thinning the herd a little bit, and it's really unfortunate to like see this happen to a lot of colleagues. But to your point, we're now able to solve real marketing problems and do like this stuff. The real reason we got into this industry in the first place, to do real good advertising. And that opportunity is now a direct response to what's happened with automation. So I'm all for it. I love it. And I'm here for it.
I feel like there's so much to unpack there. And thank you for mentioning my book.
Fred, can I just say something? Patrick just said, I just wrote this down because this might be the smartest thing I've heard in the last 14 days. This is brilliant. Patrick said the history of digital advertising has just been different versions of capitalizing on arbitrage. What a paradigm shift that one is. Like, and it was a really kind way of saying most of y'all haven't been doing much, much of anything for the last 2 to 3 years outside of just borrowing from Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
And that's worth mentioning. If all you're doing is positioning yourself right in the middle of this, this arbitrage game, we just commoditize the arbitrage, and so you have to move on, provide real value. I think that was brilliantly stated.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. I'm sure this will be on social media. A lot of people are going to like that one. But it also kind of goes into this point, and in the past, when you talk to clients, it was easy to show value, right? Because things were growing. You just go from one arbitrage to another. You'd always be showing lots of value. Nowadays, maybe we're more in the place you guys are saying where CPC costs are going up. The auctions are very competitive, so it's going to get more expensive for you. And maybe your value is that you didn't get it as expensive, as much more expensive for your client as if they hadn't had you to help them, right? But that's still a more difficult story to tell than, hey, we got more conversions, they become cheaper. Now it's like, hey, well, we got still the same number of conversions and they're only a little bit more expensive. But here's what would have happened if I wasn't helping you. It would have like doubled in cost. Is that something you guys look at, and how do you explain that to clients? Because from a client's perspective, it's like, oh my God, this agency is not doing a good job. Let me go and try somebody else, right? And then it becomes this musical chairs game almost, where they just go to a new agency every year.
I think what Kasim was saying before is true. And I think every major shift that happens, like whether it's the first shift in automation or if it's what happened with Facebook and iOS 14 or now Performance Max, there's almost like this rotation where you do have some clients that churn because they're not able to handle the change. And then after a certain amount of time, like we lost a good amount of Facebook business after iOS 14, but we've since gained a ton. That have gone through like a different cycle and have like figured out what they need to do differently. And now we've been able to pick up and figure out how to drive success in this new paradigm shifted world. And we're able to provide value for that new set of clients that have come on board. So I kind of expect the same thing to happen for PMax.
I think the agency's new job is attribution. I think attribution is the next $1 trillion problem. I really mean that. Google's operating off of a 500 touch point paradigm. The click to buy mantra is so non-existent. It's frustratingly asinine. Think about your own buying experience with anything. From an airline ticket to a pencil to a house, nobody sees an ad, buys the thing. Nobody. And there's this old 1970s Harvard Business School study that says it takes 7 touches before somebody's ready to convert. You know, it's a 50-year-old data. We're still using it. It takes hundreds of touches, impressions, views, engagements, most of which people aren't even cognizant of. So an agency that's just looking myopically at like, oh, well, Google says, I don't care what Google says. Google lies. That's my quote of the day in the year in my lifetime. Google lies. Google is lying is built into the system. I'm so sorry, Fred. I know you're part of the mothership. I got to remember that when I'm on the show. But
brought you on for a reason. We know it's always going to be this.
It's not just Google. Facebook, you know, if you sell 10 products, Google's going to say, I sold 8 of those. And Facebook's going to say, I sold 8 of those. You still only sold 10 products. So now what's the mix? Where's the efficiency? Where's the margin? They're going to steal from each other, build high walls, not let each other see across. And then there's the agency that can say, well, I think here's the lift. Here's the change. Here's the impact. Here's the impression. Businesses can't do that themselves. We just became so much more relevant. The more opaque the data gets and the more complex it gets, the more you need somebody who can actually interpret it. So then that's a good agency. It takes a good agency. So if you suck at, you know, data, if you haven't gone through Chris Mercer's measurement marketing, if you don't know what attribution is, if you're not playing with a real attribution tool, you're in a lot of trouble. But if you can go wrap your hands around that, you have more job security than any agency I can think of. There's not another agency on the planet or another skill set on the planet that's going to provide so much value. It's the little hinge that swings the big door.
Yeah, it makes total sense, right? I mean, at the end of the day, anyone who keeps a job, it's because you prove that you have certain value, and attribution is all about proving that value and reallocating money into places that have better results. So totally agree on that. Not quite sure I'm going to argue with you on the $1 trillion opportunity, because it might be overstating it.
Hundreds of billions of dollars are being spent because people don't know where the conversion lift is coming from. If you could actually say, hey, this is your acquisition channel. This is where acquisition comes from. This is your engagement. This is your consideration. This is your, like, nobody knows. Right now, we're all dealing with media marketing lift, you know, MER and just pointing at ROI and CAC. If somebody was really able to zoom in and tell you at what stage the impact happens and for what avatar, it's over.
So I agree. And it's a really hard problem. And I just want to plug, we actually just published a blog post on our website, AdventurePPC.com, where we manually created an attribution model for a D2C ecom client. Posted about how it was total pain. It was 100 hours of collective work. We had people all over the globe helping us out with manual data entry. But this blog post walks through and shows the actual data of how we got to that point, including the concept of brand lift. There's 2 different kinds of pieces here that I think we're dancing around. And you have brand lift, which is like the impact of, like, you know, you see Coca-Cola ads everywhere, and how do you measure that affinity that you have to that? But the other one that doesn't get talked about enough in the digital advertising space is what I would refer to as a halo effect, meaning like not just the impact on brand or revenue, but what is the impact that one ad has on the next ad? So what we were able to measure specifically here is all these different touch points and say, okay, well, for a non-branded Google search query, our average conversion rate was about 1%. 1% of those people who had historically clicked on that ad would convert. When we were able to measure the touch points of people who had first been shown a YouTube ad and then performed that exact same search, their expected or their actual conversion rate jumped to 2.4%. So from a math standpoint now, we can theoretically bid nearly 2.5 times more on that search query and still profitably convert that customer at the same CAC that we did before showing that YouTube ad. So now if we're saying we can now afford to bid more aggressively, that means everything. That's how you win in digital advertising, because that means we can scale more budget and we can outbid our competitors. But most people have given up on the concept of video advertising, and they've given up and they say programmatic ads don't work and YouTube doesn't work and discovery ads don't work. It's because people are trying to measure.
Good for us. We'll take that. Right?
Exactly. Let me tell you, arbitrage, YouTube costs less than it should. But that's the thing. And you need to be able to measure that and prove that to clients. But we're able to go to them and say, hey, look, like just of this cohort of people, and there's millions of kind of ways that people have interacted with our brands, but specifically pulling out the cohort of people who only saw one YouTube ad and only did one search on Google for this exact keyword. They were 2.5 times more likely to convert, and therefore we can scale with that audience. And then you factor in, we're running Pinterest for these people, we're running connected television. So you have all these different incrementality tests that you're doing across the board. becomes much more complicated. But I think understanding that principle of like the halo effect and the impact that one ad might have on the expected conversion rate on the next ad interaction, I think is the biggest thing that agencies can now bring to their clients, help them prove that. And that's the storyline that will help them get over the hump that, hey, cost per click has increased year over year. Yeah, but it's okay because we're gonna increase our conversion rate by doing these 3 things first.
Do we need a new book?
So Google is
We need
not
the
that
halo
right?
effect.
So data-driven attribution is basically that same concept. It's what sequence of searches may someone have done and how has one contributed to lifting the next one, that whole halo effect. And so, Kasim, I want to hear from you as well, but let's kind of shift a little bit into like, what does your tool stack look like? Because on the one side, if you have the perfect measurement system, you still need to be able to somehow put those bids into Google, often in real time, based on like, this persona has done these things, which we understand to be highly valuable and like halo effects and brand lift, etc. But sometimes we get a little bit stuck because Google doesn't let us set real-time bids, right? So where do you bring in smart bidding? How do you piece that together? How does that fit into your tech stack? Kasim, what are your thoughts?
Going back to attribution, I hate to keep beating this drum, by the way. I didn't realize I was going to come to this meeting all of a sudden, like waving my attribution flag. It just happened. We use Northbeam. I'm an early stage investor and advisor, but that's not why we use it. I was using it first, and then I threw money at them. My advice to everybody is don't use attribution software that's UTM dependent, because you're going to lose 30% of your conversions. It's inadequate data. Now you can extrapolate from what you've captured, but the extrapolation it's not efficient because the 30% that you're losing isn't necessarily consistent with the 60 some odd percent that you're keeping. And
well, people who block cookies are a special breed, right? Like that's a group in and of itself.
That's exactly right.
Kind of like introducing a lot of bias.
Yeah, they're different folks for sure, and they tend to be maybe a little more sophisticated, possibly a better buyer. So I feel like of all the people, Northbeam has done the best job at really getting closer to the source of truth. So that's maybe the most important tool we have. They've restricted it to e-commerce only, e-com and SaaS. But with certain clients, we won't take them unless they have at least an attribution software. We have to have a single source of truth, and it has to live outside of Google, because we're a Google specific agency, but we understand, Google's data-driven attribution is flawed, and it's flawed because it only takes into consideration Google's impact. Well, if you're running other media channels, if you're running Google and Facebook has an unbelievable impact on Google. And we have a client that's running Triple Whale. Sorry for throwing shade at Triple Whale. Triple Whale is showing an 8x return from Google. And we're telling them we're not getting 8, we're maybe getting 3 or 4. It's your Facebook ads that are really yielding this result, but because we're running brand remarketing, Google is able to steal it, and Triple Whale can't see through that veil. So knowing the difference between those two things, I think, ends up being really important. So as far as tech stack, the thing that we rely on the most is an attribution software. The other thing that I'd recommend doing is, because we've gone full on PMax, we are hooked up to a drip with the Kool-Aid, by the way. I don't trust it, but we use it. PMax is so media thirsty that it burns through creative. So this whole my brand guideline says that my logo, it's like, shut up. You can't do that. I can't play that game with you. I can't be on these. You know what I mean? Like it's like, we need to just load this thing up. It's like fast fashion. We need fast ads, Harmon Brothers are referral partners of mine. I love them dearly. And there's a place for that. Can't use your Harmon Brothers video on my PMax ad, because if you give me 5 videos, I'm going to burn through 4 of them in 6 weeks. And then I need more videos, and you're paying $100,000 for every one of those Harmon Brothers videos. So get out there with your smartphone, Fortune 100 brand, and shoot me some stuff that I can actually load into this machine learning mechanism that is burning through your media faster than you can create it.
Kasim, tell me on Northbeam real quick. I've never used them. So what does the onboarding look like for that? How long does it take, and what do you need? What does a brand have to do or realize for them to be like, okay, I'm ready to invest in Northbeam?
It depends on the media.
Let's just call it a solution like Northbeam.
Sure. Yeah. Not pushing Northbeam too hard. And by the way, Northbeam has its flaws. There's a bunch of things. We've got a publicly traded e-com company running for it right now that has some inbound media that Northbeam had never built for. And so they had to customize it. And we had some, kind of funky wonky data. The nice thing about Northbeam, though, is its ability to identify a prospect is multivariate. It's not fingerprinting. I didn't say those words because that's not allowed apparently, but they use multivariate factors in order to triangulate who a user is. So their ability to watch somebody is massively increased. The onboarding from a customer perspective is actually pretty quick. They're working on a server side attribution product. I don't think that it's ready yet, but until then, it's the same type of pixel installation that you would have for most tracking utilities. The customization comes when you add channels that aren't traditional. So if you're running, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, then Northbeam can track all that. But then we had a client that wanted to run Hulu and CTV, and Northbeam at that point hadn't built it out, so they had to build it out. But from an attribution standpoint, I can do a case study for y'all. I'm not an affiliate. It's unbelievable, like what it can do, because we have a client really big. I'm trying not to give them away because they're specific. They're a special type of clothing, and without Northbeam, it looked like YouTube was dying on the vine. To the point that you just made, Patrick. YouTube traffic being cheap, but YouTube tracking is abysmal. You can't see lift outside of YouTube. So the client wanted to turn off YouTube. We show them Northbeam, and we're like, YouTube is all your acquisition traffic. It's all of it. You turn off YouTube, and I don't know what, 4 months from now, all of your conversions are going to drop, and you're not going to know why. That's the scary thing. How many times have we turned off a campaign thinking, oh, this isn't working, only to find out like, oh no, that was the thing that was feeding the top of the funnel. And because we don't have a good cosmic view of time, marketers have a bad habit of looking at 30-day windows. Why do we do that? You know what I mean? If you turn this off 6 months ago and it's a 6-month time lag, well, you turn off your acquisition strategy and you have no idea what you did or why you did it. So Northbeam gives us a view of that. It's really cool that way.
Awesome. I'm going to check it out. I agree with that last point. It's really hard to assess when you shut off advertising for something. It's like shutting off the engines of a plane. You don't just crash to the earth. You kind of glide to a stop. We worked with one of our clients was piloting a new product, and completely new type of product, new type of idea. It's not something that people are necessarily in the market for. And it was a 6-month proof of concept, spent a lot of money advertising it. And that was shut off, I don't know, 2 months ago at this point, but we're still getting conversions. It's just like slowly falling back to earth. And it's like, I don't know why people are still signing up for the service, because we're not talking about it anywhere, like no Google branded search, nothing. But we're still getting conversions because of the investment in media that we made earlier in the year. So it is interesting to see that actually.
Yeah, like you guys are saying, I mean, when you have so many touch points, like those touch points take a while to lead up to the thing you eventually want. And it totally makes sense too. I mean, if this is like a clothing product where it's upper funnel traffic, you have to tell people this is something you might want to move them down that funnel. And so all these attribution things make sense, but let's shift it for a second here to smart bidding, right? Because I think we're all saying, well, the downside of Google is it's very Google-centric in how it measures and how it gives value. And so it may think it's giving an 800% return on investment or return on ad spend. But it's not true, because we use these better, more sophisticated systems within the agencies to understand it's really only 300%. But how do you now connect that to something like smart bidding, like PMax? Because Google, there's the measurement problem, but there's also the decision-making process that they then use. If they truly believe it's an 800% ROAS, they're going to be willing to bid more for those auctions than you believe they should. So are you leveraging the TROAS goal, or are you changing up how you report conversions and value to them? Or how do you bring their system in? Because ultimately you're probably not doing manual bidding, right? And if you are,
you can't in PMax.
Exactly. In PMax, you can't. But even if you didn't have PMax, even if it was a regular search campaign, you'd probably be on some form of TROAS, TCPA, smart bidding. But kind of like, how do you bridge that gap now between your reality and Google's reality, and Google having to bid based on what they see as their reality? So
one of the most important things that I think I've learned about machine learning is the difference between confidence and accuracy. And this is all modeling across in any statistical modeling. A machine could be confident but not accurate, meaning it thinks that, like, this is what happens when Google, hey, we have the right to spend more than twice your daily budget, and then it's like, okay, well, we didn't get any more conversions. So you can be confident but not accurate, or you could be not confident but accurate. Like, you're succeeding when you're growing your business when both of those things are together. So if you understand, like to your point earlier, Kasim, about like, hey, we know it's going to take multiple touch points. It's not just like linearly, I saw an ad for this coffee and now I bought this coffee. If if you take a step back and understand the way that this brand advertising consumer journey should work, that's when you start to pull the different levers within the machine learning. So if you start to think, hey, look, like I'm getting, we're spending below a budget that I think is appropriate. Like I know that we could be spending 3 times this amount at a better return on ad spend. If you have that gut feeling, then it's likely that you're missing out on accuracy and confidence, and you have to force the machine to learn more. So in that situation, what we would do, just to be very practical about it, is like, all right, we're going to switch everything. We're going to remove all ROAS goals. We're going to move CPA goals, and we're going to do maximize conversion value. And we're going to really bleed money a little bit for 2 weeks or whatever to push the machine to learn as much as possible, to go out there and increase its confidence and accuracy about the market that we know exists. We just have to point Google in a direction that's going to go find it. And then once you see things start to go to the direction that you think it will, then you can start to reintroduce those new TROAS like thresholds. And now it's learned a lot more. It's using different signals. It's using different variables to be able to prove accurate conversion rates at a higher scale. So just understanding like, hey, look, like I don't think that this is a product that should be sold with 1 click and 1 day. One of my favorite things I look at with a new client is the time lag report. And it's like, hey, look, you're getting 90% of your conversions within 1 day. You're selling like car insurance. People don't just make a decision, and this is just an example, right? But it's like people don't decide on that in 1 day. Like it's something that like people need to think about. They need to do multiple searches. They need to consult with their spouse, whatever. Like you should have a 13 to 20 day time lag. And the fact that you don't means that you're only optimizing your campaigns for the lowest hanging fruit that's just sitting there waiting for it. You're not really doing marketing. So once you kind of understand that and talk to clients about like, this should take a long time to convert. So we need to be able to go out there and find those people and then kind of convert them throughout the process. And it's going to suck in the short term because we're not really going to prove the business until we get to that point. But that's the way we tackle that problem.
It was kind of a friend come to me after an event, and he goes, look, man, I'm ready to go with you with Google Ads. He does high-end B2B, it's like managed SLAs. And he said, but I got to see proof of concept, 60, 90 days max. And I'm like, how long is your sales cycle? And he goes, 18 months. And so I was like, how? In your mind, how does that work? What can I do in 90 days that will show you what will happen? I don't have a time machine, but that's how we all think. It's like, I have to know if this is going to work now, regardless of, I think what you just brought up is really brilliant, Patrick. It's just like, zoom out of the digital world. It's not like people online are different. They're still going to take however long they take to buy car insurance. So if the mechanism's telling you 1 day, then we need to modify our paradigm there.
I'd like to hear from you, Kasim, too, about like what's your process working with clients, right? And I think Patrick just gave a brilliant illustration of you're asking them to do something really difficult, which is turn on the floodgates. You may not have the number of conversions you want. Like there's a lot of trust you got to put in Patrick's agency to do that. But then he explained it through, well, look, here's the time lag report, and you guys are clearly not looking at things the right way by being too aggressive on the low-hanging fruit, right? And so I'm guessing that's the trust builder. Like we know what we're doing. Invest these $20,000 to teach the machine so it can become more confident about its decisions. What does that conversation look like for you guys in terms of PMax? I mean, PMax, do you trust that, and how do you build that trust with the clients to go down that path?
I fish in a much smaller pond than Patrick does. I think AdventurePPC is one of the premier agencies and has been for a really long time, ever since Isaac dropped that Udemy course and probably beforehand. So, and this isn't me. I hope I don't offend you, Patrick. I think that the conversation when you're talking to a more sophisticated entrepreneur is a little bit easier. If they have a CMO or a director of marketing, it's easier to say. I've got clients that I have to define what CAC is. Right. I have to, and so when you're having that conversation, there's a lot of managing expectations. And so we do nothing but negative sell. It's like, look, it used to be 90 days. 50% of all Google Ads campaigns fail in the first 90 days. That was my soundbite. With PMax, it's 6 months. And so what I tell them with Performance Max, you have to let it run 6 weeks unencumbered without touching it. And then you think like, oh, well, after 6 weeks, I'll have data. No, you run it for 6 weeks. And then on day 1, you can start looking at the data and deciding because it takes 6 weeks to learn. So it's a horrible sales pitch for small businesses. And we've scared off a lot of people, but I'd rather do that than take their business. I don't want your rent money. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of SMBs, they try to play that game with us. So I manage expectations heavily. I let them know the way that Performance Max works. We've also had, with Smart Shopping, I could just feel it. You came to me with a product of Smart Shopping. I'm like, dude, 3 weeks, 1,200% ROAS. Watch this. And no, a lot of that might have been your traffic, and Smart Shopping was remarketing heavy. But
right?
yeah, but Smart Shopping was unbelievable that way. With Performance Max, I've been so wrong all the time. Somebody comes to me and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to knock this out of the park. And it's just like nothing but, oh, we're 3 feet from gold. Keep it going. Don't stop. I think we can make this work. And then there are products where I'm just like, there's no way. And Google finds the buyer and then explodes it. So it right now for me is massively opaque. I think it's going to clear up as time moves forward. But the paradigm shift that all of us need to undergo is Google used to be a bottom of the funnel marketing mechanism, generally speaking. You can talk to me about display and YouTube a little bit, but we were more often than not, even with their remarketing, bottom of the funnel. PMax is a full funnel marketing engine, and we're not used to that as advertisers and business owners. And so we have to let PMax kind of play in those top of the funnel worlds. And when we do it, when you treat Performance Max, God forgive me for saying, when you treat it a little bit more like Facebook ads, it's pretty cool the way that it functions and can actually go out, find users, teach them, and then bring them back, especially with things like final URL expansion. That blew me away. That's when I felt old the day I read what final URL expansion was. I was like, I don't decide where the traffic goes. And that moment I was like, I'm an old man and I'm looking at, it's like they've just upgraded the vehicle that I used to drive and I don't know how to drive it anymore. Like that I don't know. It really astounded me, but it works. It's crazy.
Well, on the expectations piece, one thing that I talk about a lot is first you have to ground yourself. Like if you're going to stand and say, I'm a performance agency, I'm a performance marketer, and I'm not going to try and sell you on impressions or brand lift or whatever. Like hold me accountable to profit. And once you establish that, then you can have this next part of the conversation, which I think is really important, because then it becomes, hey, look, it's not about when will this work. It's about when do we think that this can work. So to your example of the B2B lifecycle that'll take 12 or 18 months to convert, there's probably a leading indicator somewhere in there about like, all right, like things are trending in the right direction that I think that this can work and it's still worth me investing in the long term. And that's, unfortunately, this is where it's like, okay, well, we're looking at time on site and engagement rate. We're looking at people that, the percentage of people that seem to be in our target audience, which is like, sort of the anti-performance marketing argument, but it's not. It's really just like we're doing this first so that we can build something that can actually generate profit through your 18-month cycle or however long it's going to take for PMax to learn who that customer is. Some of the times we'll set up like events. I hate like micro conversions or something that like I think is not overblown, but I think like people kind of talk about it as if it's like an easy solution. But I think that there's certain times where if you're trying to identify who your target audience is, you could set up certain things on your site about like asking the user a question or figuring out if they're going to choose this page instead of that page. And if you create goals as simple as create a goal in Google Analytics and just see, okay, we launched this new campaign. What percentage of people are doing the thing that tells me that it's the right person? And then optimize for that over time, and you'll be kind of steering the ship in the right direction, and eventually it'll hit. So if you can kind of tell the client that story and say, this is how we build a framework for success, and these are the indicators that are ultimately going to lead to profit. That's generally, because essentially a lot of times as a marketing agency, you're just buying time to wait for the ads to do the work that they need to do. So it's a lot of like, you just have to keep selling it and be like, listen, like, here's what we're watching. Here's how we're thinking about things. This looks like it's going in the right direction. So let's keep feeding it. And then eventually you just kind of have to hope that the lottery numbers hit when they do.
I've written down so many things that you've said. Do you have a whiteboard somewhere that you're reading off of, or is this just coming to you? Because that's brilliant. As an agency, so many times you're just buying time to let the ads do what they need to do. That's so true. Yeah. I'm sharing that with my
said you're nudging too, right? So
right
you're
now.
nudging the machine to go into the right direction. So I like that, and that's a lot of what I keep saying people should do as well. Kasim, like, what tips do you have? Like, again, you love PMax. Have you found ways to nudge the machine or to demystify what's in the black box a little bit?
So Patrick nailed it earlier. We don't run TROAS at all. I've got my SOP pulled up here, and we actually publish this. It's free. There's no opt-in, but you can go to my Twitter account and download our Performance Max S.O.P. that will show you exactly how it is that we build our PMax campaigns, the amount of time that we let them run. But we're using maximized conversion value, generally speaking, unless you have a strong reason not to, which would usually mean your LTV is not disparate. But we don't run TROAS, period, because if you run TROAS, you put a lid on the ceiling of learning. The analogy that I really like, y'all remember them talking about the flea? If you put, a flea can jump 6 feet, but if you put a flea in a box and put a lid on the box and leave the flea in there, after you take the lid off, the flea will never jump past where the lid was. Because I guess it hit its...
That analogy, I like that.
It's for self-improvement. It's all about like if you keep somebody down. But it works for PMax too, because if you put a lid on PMax, even when you take it off, it's really hard to draw it out of that. So we like to run no TROAS. Now, keep in mind, according to Google, if you don't have a TROAS applied, there's an automatic 200% TROAS target applied to your account. So if you have a sub 200% target, you can actually put a sub 200% TROAS in. That's the caveat and the asterisk. But we like to run PMax unencumbered for as long as you can. Don't put TROAS on for as long as you possibly can. And then you also want to do some things. I don't like sculpting right now. A lot of agencies come in there and it can be forgiven because they want to do the work. All of your products in one PMax. All of your products, because PMax had the same problem that Smart Shopping has, which is the asset group that gets the click gets the remarketing. And if I click on product A but buy product B, and you've separated those in 2 different campaigns, you're going to kill the cross-pollination. So what we do is we have all of our products in one PMax, but you then separate asset groups by product categories. And what you want to do is you want to take all your product categories, all the applicable audiences, and that's how many asset groups you have. So if I have 5 product categories and 5 audiences, then I have 25 asset groups. And then you also have an asset group for all of your products to each of the audiences if you haven't reached your 100 asset group limit yet. As many asset groups as you can build, asterisk. You have to have the budget to support that. And then here's what's freaking crazy. Google's created media. I've got videos of this, egg on my face. I was like, don't use it. They're horrible. The videos look like old PowerPoint presentations. They crush. We've got phenomenal videos that we split tested on accident, really. Google ran theirs and we didn't, because they had them automatically, because God bless Google. And Google's videos are beating our videos on multiple levels of analysis across multiple clients. And I have a theory as to why. I think it's not that their videos are better. It's that because their videos are dynamically created, if I give Google a video, it has to live inside of certain proportions. And so the display capabilities are limited. If Google creates a video, it can put it anywhere it wants. And so I remember Google one time saying responsive ads, get 30% more permeation and penetration. I think the same thing is true with video. I think you're capitalizing on traffic that's effectively free, and it's crazy what happens when you let it go. How is that? I've got more, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I have a bad habit of doing that.
Yeah, I love it. Let's do another episode where we just go full on PMax. This was great.
I think that was
excellent. It seemed like you wanted to say something, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think that was an incredible way to describe the benefits of liquidity across different asset groups and really budget. And basically saying like, hey, listen, don't over-segment this stuff. Like, set it up, create a framework for machine learning to do its thing. Don't get in there with your meaty paws and ruin everything because you're trying to split stuff out. Like, just let it, like, my attitude is typically like Google is giving these recommendations in the way that you should set up campaigns for a reason. So like start with the idea that like it's right. Start with the idea like Google's probably right, and then find the situation where they're wrong. Like the mantra that I always talk about with our team is like never always, never. Like never say that something works all the time or none of the time. So there's always an opportunity there. But if you start with that concept of like, okay, well, Google's saying I should put all these things in one campaign, maybe I should start with that and then iterate from there. But that's really the benefit of kind of what's going to happen in a machine learning environment. So I think that's brilliant. And I'm definitely going to dive into the SOP you have and steal some of those ideas.
I've been stealing your quotes the whole day, so we're going to be even.
To talk a little bit, both of you, about humans plus machines, right? Zero volume. As agencies, you hire people a long time before the age of automation. How have transitions? What are they working on nowadays?
Patrick, I'll let you go first.
So, what's like, we've hired a lot of people that don't really have any experience in this, because we found people from all walks of life that have a background in accounting or design or statistics or business consulting or whatever. And they just happen to mesh well with this type of work. And it's really a creative problem solving role. That example I gave earlier, about like, hey, like you have to have a gut feeling about what the machine's doing. You have to have a gut feeling about confidence and accuracy. So there's like a certain way that I think your mind has to be able to solve problems to succeed in this type of role. But also you have to have the statistical and math acumen to be able to like do the work and understand what it is, plus the communication element of it, that like you write good headlines and you understand what a good advertisement looks like. So it's a really weird thing. And I think that you can find those people anywhere as long as you can like cultivate them and train them. The interesting thing is it's harder, I think, now to get somebody to learn the material. It was easier when it was all manual. Like I love now. So we don't just exclusively take on larger clients. We take on clients of all different sizes. And on a smaller client, or I guess a larger client is more likely going to be sophisticated. Like they're more likely to come to us already having data-driven attribution, already having sophisticated conversion tracking, and already being like opted into PMax. But a smaller client is like still likely to be on manual bidding. And I think it's so valuable for somebody to be able to learn how Google Ads works and then teach them machine learning after they know manual bidding and traditional account structure and SCAGs and all that stuff. Because it's just easier to be like, hey, look, search query is a signal, but there's like millions of other signals that Google layers on top of it. But think about it for a second, that like for 15 years, all we did was look at search query as the signal. And now you can understand, oh, PMax is that times like 3 million. And I think that that's really something that helps people learn. And we've kind of built that into, we sort of simulated at this point with newer employees. We kind of train them to think in the same way that we were training people 10 years ago. We're doing that now and then layering the automation piece on top of it.
That's really brilliant. It's if a machine's going to do your job, you have to know the job the machine is doing.
Yeah.
So don't hire somebody to serve the machine. Hire somebody who knows how to do the job, and then monitor the machine. We're having a
why, like if you're pre-med, you're going to learn organic chemistry. You're never going to have to know carbon compounds or whatever, but like that's the same principle. It's like you really have to know the basics of how like these things work so that you have a strong foundation that you can build on top of.
Yeah, that's well stated. My favorite employees are all entrepreneurs, and my favorite place to hire is from we all do courses. We do some coursework, not to your degree, but we hire people that have their own business, their own e-com site, and they're trying to make it work. And I like them because the way that they approach the mechanism is with a goal in mind. And if you approach the mechanism to do a job, I feel like it's a flawed expectation, because you have a tool now and you're like, all right, I've got a hammer, let me go find nails. And that's a scary place, I think, for anybody to, now you're just going to run around smacking things with your hammer. And regardless of the output, you're like, well, I used my hammer, I did my job. I like people that have approached Google Ads with, I know what I want it to do, because that begin with the end in mind. It changes the way they use Google. And sometimes Google's not the answer. And sometimes it's us telling clients, hey, you need to go find, go influencer, go strategic partnerships, go organic. And so I like zooming out of just the marketing mechanism and talking about, the endeavor at play. And you already touched on this a little bit, but you have to think outside of just ads. You have to think about the business and the goals. And, you have to know rough economics and supply and demand and all stuff that media buyers just didn't need to know 18 months ago. It wasn't as relevant or as important.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think is, and I love that. Like we've hired a few people here that were entrepreneurs or ran their own agency for a little bit. And it is so interesting to see that they think at a higher level, or they just think at a different level than other individuals, for better or worse, right? Like there's a lot to be said for that as well. What do you think is the main thing that, like, someone's 3 to 6 months into the job and they're doing good work, and they come to you and say, I want to grow within the organization. What are the things I need to learn? What do you think are the things that you're like having people go out and take courses on or read books on?
Measurement. We put everybody through. Yeah, it's so important, and everybody's bad at it. You know what's really sad? I had Chris Mercer on my YouTube channel. Do y'all know Chris? Measurement marketing. I think he's the most important voice in marketing. I had Chris on my YouTube channel. It was an hour-long interview. It was the best interview I've ever done in my entire life. He gave so much value, nuts and bolts value. I recently had Tom Breeze out on my YouTube channel, and he goes, oh, your lowest retention across all 400 videos was this Chris Mercer interview. It was the best content ever, but people are repelled by the topic. They're repelled by measurement. They don't want to do it. And so I think if for a marketer, if there's anything that you can learn or know, it's measurement. It's how do we know this is working? But nobody wants, they want to do creative. They want to do targeting. They want to do, like big picture.
Measurement is technical, right? I mean, you get into having to set up Google Tag Manager and figuring out how to write some JavaScript. So I can see where people are hesitant to go down that path, but maybe that's what we should be hiring more of them, right? Based on what you're saying. So that makes total sense.
I think it's fascinating that you said that that's your lowest retention. That's so that's the crux of the content marketing problem is the best content is and I remember seeing this years ago that HubSpot's #1 blog of all time is just titled how to do Microsoft Excel. That has just literally nothing to do with what HubSpot's value proposition is. The best book I've read in probably the last 3 years is called How Brands Grow by a guy named Byron Sharp. It's very technical. It's kind of boring, but it's absolutely brilliant. And it's the sort of thing that I wish every single marketer read, but they don't because it's not written by a guru. It's not fun to read or talk about. You really have to be in a quiet room, going through these concepts. And it's something that completely changed. There's a bit of measurement layered in there, but it's more about some higher level, thinking about strategic branding. But I agree. And it's why aren't more people reading this? And it's because it's hard and it's technical and people don't want to embrace that. So I'm definitely going to check out that video, and I'm totally going to, I already wrote down.
We'll put the video, we'll put the book in the show notes so people can easily find it. And that's our job, right? Is to be somewhat entertaining and then drop a nugget here and there of this is the thing you actually need to pay attention to after you're done with us. But yeah, we're coming close here to the end of the hour. Both of you tell people where they can find you. Any final thoughts on maybe something we haven't covered? But yeah, Kasim, what should people do after watching this video besides checking out your other YouTube videos?
You can follow me on Twitter. I say some obnoxious, unimportant things. Yeah.
And if people want to work with you, where do they find you?
They can go to Sol8, SOL8.com, Sol8.com.
Awesome. And you can hit him up for lots of PMax advice.
That's right.
Patrick, what about you? Where can folks find you if they want to work with Adventure Media?
Well, find me on LinkedIn and Twitter, Patrick Gilbert. You'll stumble across me somewhere. I don't post as much as I would like to, but maybe if my follower count goes up, it'll encourage me to be more interactive. AdventurePPC.com is our website. Check us out. We have a lot of great content hidden in there. I mentioned that blog post that we just put up about attribution. Definitely check that out. And then, of course, my book, Join or Die, Digital Advertising in the Age of Automation. We actually have an audio version finally coming out within the next 2 to 3 months. That is not an easy thing to do.
Nice. Put that book in front of your face again. I was off screen. So make sure people can see it right there.
The one with the snake.
There you go.
That's Ben Franklin.
Ben Franklin.
All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for watching our show today. It's been fun hanging out with Patrick and Kasim. So if you like these videos, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Use the button at the bottom. You can also go to ppctownhall.com, subscribe to the email list. We'll tell you when there's a new episode ready to be dropped. And then if you haven't tried Optmyzr, that's a great tool. We don't do a lot of the attribution stuff we've been talking about today, but once you get the measurements, we'll help you execute on your plan and actually make PPC work for you. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you for the next episode. Bye now.